In 1920, a monastery library opened a bundle of papers that had sat unread for a century. It was the oldest surviving copy of the Grimm fairy tales, handwritten, posted to a friend in 1810. Set it beside the edition you grew up reading, and whole passages are gone. Not lost in a fire. Removed on purpose, one edition at a time by one of the brothers himself. Wilhelm Grimm kept doing it for 45 years. Let's be precise about what we are comparing, because almost every argument about the Grimms goes wrong at exactly this point. Volume 1 of Kinder- and Hausmarchen, the Children's and Household Tales, came out in 1812 with 86 stories. Volume 2 followed 3 years later with 70 more.
That book wasn't built for children. It carried footnotes. It carried scholarly comparisons with other European collections. Jacob Grimm in particular wanted a document, evidence of how ordinary German speech had carried stories across generations. Reviewers weren't kind about it. They pointed out, correctly, that a book presented as a family collection contained material no family would read aloud. They listened. Edition 2 arrived in 1819, and from that point, the project belongs mostly to Wilhelm. Jacob had turned toward grammar, toward the foundations of German historical linguistics, which is its own extraordinary story, and not this one. Wilhelm kept the tales. He revised them again in 1837, in 1840, in 1843, in 1850, and finally in 1857. That last edition is the one nearly every translation on your shelf descends from. 7 editions, 210 stories by the end, up from 156. More tales and less of each one. Here is the clearest single example, and it takes about 30 seconds to see. In the 1812 text, Rapunzel is in the tower and the prince has been visiting. She says one line to the woman who keeps her there. She asks why her clothes have grown so tight that they no longer fit her. That line does one job, and it does it well. It tells the reader she is pregnant. It explains why she is cast out of the tower, and it explains where the twins at the end of the story come from without a word of description. This sentence is load-bearing. The plot needs it. Open the 1857 edition, and the sentence has been swapped out. Rapunzel now asks why the older woman is so much heavier to pull up than the young prince. Nothing about the consequence changes. She is discovered, she is thrown out of the tower, but the cause has moved from a body to a slip of the tongue. And the twins who turn up at the end now turn up from nowhere at all. That is what a working edit looks like. It didn't delete a scene, it replaced a cause. Pattern 2 is easier to miss because it is one word long.
In 1812, the woman who wants Snow White dead is her mother, her actual mother. Same jealousy, same mirror, same huntsman, same everything you remember, except the relationship, which is the part that makes the story hard to sit through. By 1819, she is a stepmother. That single substitution turns up again a few editions later, in another tale in the collection, and the reasoning looks identical. Wilhelm never spelled it out in a preface, so we are reading intention off a pattern here, and I want to be careful about that. But the pattern runs one way and only one way. It always moves cruelty out of the birth family and onto an outsider.
There is a version of this video where I tell you the Grimms were concealing the older versions from you. I don't think that's what happened. Wilhelm was after a much more ordinary result, and a much more effective one. He was making the book sellable to parents. He also didn't only take material out, he put a lot in. Across the editions, the tales get longer, and the extra length has a particular flavor. Dialogue where there had been summary, diminutives, dozens of them, little house, little bed, little door, little cap, doing the work of a warm speaking voice. Proverbs, turns of phrase that make a story sound like it has been told 1,000 times.
which is exactly the impression a printed book has to manufacture if it wants to pass for oral tradition. Religion, too. Prayer, providence, the will of God, turning up in places where the earlier text had simply not mentioned him. There is a genuine argument that all of this made the tales better. The 1857 versions read better than the 1812 versions, and it isn't close. Wilhelm was a gifted stylist. The book most of us love is largely his book, and pretending otherwise would be a small dishonesty of its own. The trouble is only with what the prefaces claimed. The collection was described as faithful. Faithful to what is the question those 7 editions end up answering for us. Some stories didn't survive the process at all. A handful of tales printed in 1812 were dropped from later editions and never came back. A few were cut because the brothers decided they weren't German enough, traceable to a French printed source rather than a German household. That mattered enormously to a project built on the idea of a national tradition. At least one was removed because no family collection could plausibly carry it, and I'm not going to describe it here. What matters is that the deletion is documented, and that it was theirs. Meanwhile, new tales came in, so the collection grows from 156 to 210, while individual stories are quietly being taken out. A rising total hides the curation underneath it, which is worth remembering whenever anyone tells you a folk collection is complete. Nor were the brothers silent about the criticism. From the 2nd edition onward, the prefaces answer it directly. The tales were a national inheritance, they argued, and a collector's duty was to preserve rather than invent. It is a good argument. It is also, read next to the actual revisions, a description of a book Wilhelm was no longer making. Now the part that changes how you read all of it. Most people carry a picture of 2 brothers walking German villages with a notebook, writing down what peasants told them. That picture is mostly wrong. And we know it is wrong because the scholar Heinz Rolleke worked out who the sources actually were. They were, in large part, educated women in and around Kassel, the Hassenfloch family, the Wild family, one of whom, Dorchen, eventually married Wilhelm. Literate, middle-class households, several of them descended from French Huguenots, which means some of these stories arrived in the collection already carrying French literary shape. Their most famous source of all is Dorothea Feeman. The Grimms praised her in a preface as the ideal peasant storyteller with a perfect memory. She was a tailor's wife, and she was literate. Her family background was Huguenot too. None of this is a scandal. It is a correction, and it matters because it removes the idea that a pure folk version is sitting underneath all the editing, waiting to be recovered. There is no bottom layer. There is an 1810 manuscript, and even that manuscript is already somebody's telling of somebody else's telling. One more book, and it is the one that actually won. In 1825, the brothers published a small edition, 50 tales, chosen and illustrated by their younger brother Ludwig Emil. It was cheap. It was made for children, openly and on purpose. And it outsold the large scholarly edition by a wide margin, reprinting again and again while the brothers were still alive. So when people say the Grimm fairy tales were turned into children's stories, the honest version is narrower and stranger than that. The Grimms turned their own fairy tales into children's stories in a separate product, and then let the big edition drift toward the small one. By 1857, the 2 books had met somewhere in the middle. Which raises the obvious objection, and it deserves a real answer. Wilhelm had another option. He knew he had it because he had already used it somewhere else. He could have left the tales alone and put the changes in the notes. That isn't a hypothetical. In 1822, the brothers published their commentary as a separate volume, sources, variants, comparisons, everything a scholar could want, sitting outside the stories instead of inside them. The machinery for saying here is the older reading already existed in their own bibliography. He could have printed the 1812 Rapunzel and footnoted the objection. He could have kept the mother and explained her. Jacob would probably have preferred exactly that.
He had wanted a document from the beginning, and a document is allowed to be uncomfortable. But there was a plain reason Wilhelm went the other way. A volume of annotated variants finds a few libraries. A book of stories finds a country.
And by the 1820s, the household tales were no longer only a scholarly project. They were the family income, and they were becoming the book Germany recognized itself in. I don't think Wilhelm made a dishonest choice. I think he made a commercial one, over and over across 45 years, and each decision on its own was small enough to look like an ordinary correction. That is usually how a text changes. Not one act of censorship, but several hundred reasonable edits, all leaning the same way. Which is why that bundle of paper in the abbey at Uhlenberg matters more than it looks. The 1810 manuscript is not the true version of the Grimm fairy tales. It is only the earliest one anyone can hold.
But it is the single copy Wilhelm never got to revise. And the reason is almost funny. He sent it to his friend Clemens Brentano and asked for it back. Brentano kept it. He kept it and forgot about it. The manuscript survived precisely because it had left the house. Every other version passed back through Wilhelm's hands 7 times. And once you have watched how much moves between 1812 and 1857, one detail gets very hard to unsee. In every Grimm edition, first to last, there is no kiss in the Frog King. She doesn't kiss him. She throws him against the wall. Wilhelm spent 45 years softening mothers, removing pregnancies, trimming endings, and adding prayers, and he left that in.
So the kiss came from somewhere else entirely. Somebody else made that choice later, and we can find out who.